Welcome to Trini Inspiration, Season 2, Episode 2. Today, we're going to get right into our show, and I will take great pleasure yet again, just like I did last week, in introducing someone who is a near and dear friend of mine, and I only ever say near and dear friend on public platforms because we have a very lovingly sarcastic relationship between ourselves, where positive expressions of love and the like are not commonplace between us. Our love language is quite different. But today I'll be good, and I'll say a very special and warm good afternoon to none other than a former co-worker of mine at 103.1 FM, a teacher now, someone who is has a lot of media experience under her belt, being a former newscaster, news presenter, journalist. She's worked in IT and in promotions as well as being an on-air talent on various shows, including being the understudy for the show that I host still on a morning while she was present, which is the Morning Drive on 103 in the form of Prop Heart. And now the owner of a company called Avani Events, actually part owner because it's a joint partnership between herself and her fiancé. I take great pleasure in introducing none other than Shivanie Harripersad.
Wow, Fazeer, that was the best welcome you've ever given me in life.
I know it's Trini Inspiration, so I'm trying to be nice. Hey, but welcome to the show. June is the month of weddings, and we are in the midst of a global pandemic, and for yet another year, it is not wedding season in June. It may be wedding season still in our minds. We may still recognize June as the month of weddings and of matrimony, but things have changed. And you, having had first-hand experience in wedding season and with your vast wedding experience in just a few years, I thought it was only fit that we chat about this a little bit and find out exactly and firsthand where the industry is at. So we all know what wedding season was like prior to COVID-19. How have things changed, though? What has the last year or 14 months or so been like for Avani Events? You all offer wedding coordination and planning services, so literally any and all services as they pertain to the wedding, from decor to planning, coordination on the day, execution, you name it, in addition to emceeing services, DJing services, so literally a one-stop shop. So you're probably best poised to give us an idea or some insights into how things have changed. So that's my first question. How has weddings and the wedding industry changed as a result of the pandemic?
Well, Fazeer, before I get to that question, you mentioned June being the traditional month of weddings, but that has changed over the past few years. Weddings are now being done at any point in time. Right? Apart from that, last year in March, when we went into lockdown, I already had booked several weddings for the year. This included foreign weddings because a lot of people from abroad who have their families in Trinidad, they decide to come down to Trinidad to celebrate. So they have a grander celebration here in Trinidad as opposed to what it would cost them abroad, right? All of those weddings were canceled. And it didn't cancel in March because Canada went into lockdown before us, right? The US, they were already experiencing their part of the pandemic, which was the death toll was rising and people were being tested as positive and whatnot.
Right. But we locked down before they did.
Yeah,
right.
But they were already experiencing those things. So in light of that, I had a couple of weddings that were coming from Texas and a couple other places, and they had put me on hold. So they called and said, hey, Shivanie, I know we discussed August, but I'm not sure what's going to happen, right? Yeah. We're going to look at it and we're going to see what's going to happen. When Canada went into lockdown, two brides from Canada called me and said, okay, we still want to have our wedding in Trinidad. If things get better within the next 3 months, we are going to come to Trinidad at some point in time and have the wedding. So I went ahead and looked at venues. I went ahead and looked at, everything that they needed to get done. And then I got the call, you know what, we really have to cancel. So they ended up doing very small weddings. I mean, it was lovely because they got, the nice locations on the lakeside and that, things that we don't have here. So all of those weddings, every single one of my foreign weddings were canceled. The local weddings, on the other hand, I think a lot of people were positive that this was not going to go over 3 months, and therefore kept hope that, let's see, we're going to open back in 3 months here, everything is going to be fine, and we're going to have the wedding later down in the year. So a lot of the weddings were postponed till later down in the year.
Right.
Only one particular wedding, because of the fact that both parents were basically elderly, and, they didn't want anything to happen, they went ahead and did their garage wedding. So it was literally a garage. The garage was 12 feet in width by maybe about 20 feet in length. And it was a Hindu wedding. So we just did the mandap setup and we left. And they had their 10 people, they did their wedding. It came out fine, but that was the only wedding. Everybody else, Fazeer, had to be refunded. So last year was a really, really tough year because with all the extensions and, all the restrictions and that sort of thing, people decided, you know what, let's just cancel, and whenever we can, we will.
So, one of the important things to note there is that at the very start of the pandemic last year, hindsight is 2020, so we could look back at it now and we know how things panned out. But at the start of it, most of us, in fact, most of the world for that matter, thought that this was just something that was fleeting. This was something that was temporary. Maybe in a couple of weeks, things will be back to normal.
Yeah.
Nobody in their wildest imaginations would have imagined. So I noted your use of the word postponed, because I know from my own friends and family circles, that was the word in a worst case scenario that people were using. Mm-hmm. Until, as they say, the crap hit the fan, and then everything went topsy-turvy in Trinidad and we went into the lockdowns and that sort of stuff. But even still, during that time, we had periods where weddings, people realized what was happening, and they decided that they realized that they had to make a choice. The choice was either to cancel indefinitely or postpone indefinitely, or settle for something much smaller, or still try to do something big whilst knowingly breaking the law. and we have to add that to the conversation for it to really be a very open and honest conversation, because over the last year I have hosted 2 COVID weddings.
Right.
The first was a family wedding, and there were 13 people at that wedding. 13 people simply because the family itself that lived in the household was a family of 6 or 7 people, right? And the other people were the witnesses, the imam, so the imam, the witnesses, and the bride's mother and family, right? Like literally mother and a sister or something like that, right? 2 people on the bride's side. So that was the first one, 13 people, and this was during that time when it was possible, right? And the other wedding was just before this last lockdown, when there were gatherings of 10 that were allowed, and this was a backyard wedding. Both of them were weddings that were done at home. And this is how things have changed. A lot of people have settled on the notion, they've given up on the idea of having that dream wedding. So they're settling, and they're saying that they're saving money. They're saying that the weddings are much more intimate.
Yes, definitely.
Cozier, and with the way things going, the way that they are, not just in the wedding industry, but economically as well, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And people have realized, well, it's either I want to be married or I want a big wedding. Do I want the marriage or do I want the wedding?
That is the question. That is actually the $1 million question, because the ones who would have postponed from last year indefinitely, as you said, until, things could open up. One of the brides said to me that the hardest part for her was knowing that she could not invite people who were instrumental in her growing up. And that was a very sentimental thing for her,
right? Being
able to have these people there and having to pick and not invite her grandma, who took care of her when she was a baby, or, not inviting that auntie or cousin that you're so close to. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of the choices that were made to postpone until at least we could get like 30 people, because I think 30 was actually doable in a lot of the weddings, for the number of guests, right? 30 was a doable number. Yes, we could stick to 30. I get 15, you get 15. We're good to go. But it was a difficult decision for a lot of people.
But do you remember a period of time, there was a period when there was a whole lot of gray surrounding the issue. And during that period of gray, when things weren't made abundantly clear, they were saying, the government was saying and signaling things along the lines of, 50% capacity, etc.
Yes.
But numbers weren't clear at the time. And we had gotten invited to a wedding at a location in South, right? Do you remember what month this would have been? I can't remember the month offhand, but we got invited to a wedding at a location in South, and we asked, well, how many people are going to be there? And they said, oh, not much. And we pressed a little further. How much is not much? And well, we're sticking to the rules, which is however much the capacity was at the time. But that would have amounted to them having about a little over 100 people, 150 people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were saying that this is 150 people spread out over this venue.
Right.
And in the end, we opted not to go. And not just for health and safety reasons, but because at the time, we weren't clear whether we would have been breaking the law or not.
Yes.
Now, thankfully, we've come to a point now where it's explicitly clear whether you are or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I even went so far as to call 2 attorneys beforehand,
Yes.
which sounds a little crazy.
It doesn't. It doesn't sound crazy at all, because I did the same.
because I was telling the people who invited us to the wedding, and my wife and I were talking about it, and we were like, you go to this wedding. The law isn't crystal clear, but the police decide to bust this wedding, right? They're going to, usually what happens is they're going to look for anybody of public profile in attendance, and that's the person whose picture is going to end up on the front page of the newspaper the next day. And I didn't want that happening to me, because it wasn't a case of us being disrespectful or disregarding the law, but the law wasn't clear at the time.
It was not.
And people were still trying to find a way to move on, and they didn't want to lose their deposit.
Yes. So that was the other thing. I mean, it is COVID-19. Who came up with COVID-19? Who, what it was about? I have a contract that's 8 pages long, right? And if ever you read my contract, you will be able to decipher my issues that I've had over the years, right? Because the contract went from being 1 page to 8 pages long.
Right.
Now, part of the contract states that if ever the wedding has to be postponed or cancelled or whatever the case is, due to an act of God, act of nature, these things, that we will make whatever provisions necessary to either refund the couple or, change the dates, accommodate, give them first preference, things like that. But what is COVID-19? We did not know. How am I supposed to class COVID-19? Is it an act of God because you're hearing it's man-made? Right? There are so many things, so many question marks are surrounding COVID-19. With respect to the 50% capacity, there are some temples, for instance, or churches that can accommodate 500 people. 50% capacity would ideally mean I'm allowed 250 people, which to me is a fantastic number for a wedding, right? Then there was some that said, okay, no, even though the law says 50%, we can only accommodate 100 people, which again is still a decent number, right? But there was that question mark being raised with respect to the numbers, and it was a time where brides have been calling me, okay, so I want to move the wedding now from home to the temple, or I want to move it from the temple to home, because home, they're saying that police cannot enter your property, it's private property, so let's just have it home and we will ensure social distancing. Now, one of the things that I started offering as of last year, especially last year, were now ushering is something that we would have done from before, but this time I had a contact tracing list. Everybody who entered, their name needed to be on the list, so they would have been invited. If they had a +1 or whatever the case is, their names were added. Their contact information, their address, everything was taken, and then they were let in, and we seated them accordingly. So when a table could have accommodated 10 people, a regular round table, we did like 6, 5, 4 people according to families.
Right.
So therefore you exist in your own bubble, right? You are in your bubble of people that you're accustomed to, and you're sitting there with your family members, not a stranger. So for instance, if you came as a couple, right, and you came to that wedding, I can't just put 2 people on a big table. So let's just say you came, we would have found accommodation for you separate. So that's why we did seating charts. That was really important at this point in time for COVID-19. So we had the contact tracing list, we had the ushers, we asked people not to get up at all once seated. If you needed to get up, please keep your mask on and move around, right? We had ushers coming to the table specifically to invite people to eat. So when I invited table number 1 to eat, when table number 1 is cleared, then table number 2 could come up, right? So therefore, you don't have that mixing of people. Now, there's only so much you could control at a wedding, right? And then we cut out the party part because, as you know, dancehall licenses were suspended and all of these things, you couldn't play music and whatnot. We had light music, yes, right? But not party music. So a lot of these things we had to adjust to and take into consideration. The venue size now was another thing because whereas a venue could accommodate 100 people, it could now accommodate, let's just say 30, 40 people because of the social distancing. Because I had to put tables a certain distance from each other. I had to make sure there was a clear line from the eating area to the bathroom or to the catering.
And
caterers.
while you were doing all of this, though, do you know offhand if there were any other wedding vendors or providers, service providers, coordinators, etc., who would have been doing the same? Was this across the industry? Was this standard adopted across the industry, or was this just something that you adopted, and you know of some others who followed suit, or
honestly,
not so?
I don't. It's something that while I was sitting and trying to figure out, okay, how do we? Because remember, our job is really to. This is the bride's big day. This is her big day. This is a day she's been dreaming of for forever, right? And we are trying to make the best of a bad situation. So this was us sitting down and trying to figure out how do we give her what she wants and yet be safe and yet follow the law and yet, let everybody else be safe.
So you were doing that thing that everybody is talking about doing right now, which is pivoting. Is it safe? I think it's safe to use that word, right? So Shivanie, in terms of brass numbers, though, how has that been? Whether you want to use actual numbers or a percentage of the job quantity that you would have gotten in the past, what has the last 14 months been like?
Honestly, I've probably had like 5 or 6 weddings. In a 14-month period, that is terrible because I would have had 5 or 6 weddings in 2 weekends.
Wow.
So you could do the math there if you wish, right? 5 or 6 weddings that would have taken me let's just worst case scenario, a month, right? Compared to 14 months, that's 13 months of no weddings.
Yeah.
So it has been hard.
13 months of no work and or income from this for
income.
yourself and Avani, and for all of the vendors that you would hire, because you are really the coordinator of many of the other vendors who pull together these events.
Yeah. There was, however, as you mentioned, gray areas before, there was, however, a weekend where the lockdown came to an end. Nobody said anything. And then the following week, they implemented new measures.
Right.
That weekend, people used to their advantage. That weekend had weddings, because there was nothing being said about restrictions.
Right.
At that point in time. And I believe that was last year, July, if I'm not mistaken.
Time itself, it's all kind of time collapsed 1 month, 1 week into the next kind of thing. So to pinpoint specific times, I'm not going to even attempt that. But I had pre-conversations in advance of our conversation today. I spoke with, I reached out to another wedding planner, and asked for his feedback on this same subject matter. And basically, the gist of what I got was, thank God that wasn't his only source of income.
Yes.
His biggest issue really was that with the cancellations, right? Not having jobs coming in was one thing, but with the cancellations, he would have incurred some expenses, and now he would have had to give the refunds, right? And full refunds, right? Because obviously with COVID, people didn't want to hear that you had already incurred some cost. They wanted a full refund because in their minds the wedding is off. And not all of them. I'm not sure if he falls into that category, but not all of them are as protected as you are with your eight-page contract. So he's also that kind of guy. He told me that he gave everybody their refunds back and that sort of stuff, and it's been really rough, really tough for him, and many others that he would, just like you, rely on as vendors. On the other side of that, though, I spoke with one pundit who explained to me what has been happening. In fact, just recently, I had a conversation with him, and he was explaining to me that many people are still getting married.
Yes.
Even though there are restrictions of gatherings on 5 people and or 10 people, depending on how it changes from time to time. And what he explained to me was a situation where people have realized that you have to choose between whether you want the wedding or you want the marriage. And so the ones who are serious about wanting the marriage are willing to forego the wedding, but there are aspects of the wedding that they're still focusing on.
Yes.
And he explained one example in detail to let me know about a bride who she really wanted the full works in terms of the decor.
Yes.
So you spoke about the mandap and stuff like that earlier. So she spared no expense when it came to those things in her house.
Yes.
And made all the provisions. She had less than 10 people in her house. The groom spent the night at the house or arrived early in the morning, something to that effect, so that there wouldn't be a wedding car pulling up for the neighbors to get bummy and call the police or anything like that. But they weren't breaking the law. So the groom was coming from upstairs into downstairs, or however they partitioned the house, so they could still do their traditional wedding, and people are finding ways and other ways to make it work. And they're finding the things that really mean and matter the most to them, the specific things that they dreamed about or didn't want to compromise on. And he also mentioned to me that in many of these instances, this was before the lockdown on food as well. He was saying that in many of these instances, people were still catering their food.
Right. So I was about to tell you that there was one mom who hired me, right? I didn't deal with the couple. I still don't know them. Right? This mom took charge, and she was a very nice lady, very easy to work with. She knew exactly what she wanted, and I did exactly what she wanted. And she said to me, Shivanie, why am I going to hold back these children and their lives? Just for a big wedding? No, they need to move on with their lives. But she said, I want to have my place looking top. Right? I'm not going to spare any expense with respect to decor. I want my 10 people to come here and feel as if they are in a wedding, even though, we have all these restrictions. So I set up the place for 10 people. It's a Hindu wedding, but they did somewhat of a Hindu wedding / reception, so it wasn't very Bollywood in decor, right? She wanted something that wasn't extremely Bollywood. So we had elements of Bollywood in a rustic style wedding. So we did that. So I told her, I said, well, you have 10 people. These are the 10 most important people in your lives, right? Why not go a little extra on the food? So she ordered authentic Indian food for lunch. And they did, for the reception, they did Thai cuisine, right? So they ordered their food. The caterer came, dropped it off, but in the foil trays. So it's not a service. Right, because they can't stay because the numbers would have exceeded, and they live on the main road. So she went all out with the food. She ordered the cake that they really, really wanted. She ordered desserts galore. Everybody had at least 5 desserts, 5 different styles, So she had everything, and she called me the next day and she said, I'm still eating wedding food. And she said everything was exceptional. It was intimate but exceptional.
So I think the inspiration and all of that, is safe to say that that people have really question their motives
Yeah.
in having big weddings. What was the real reason for having the big wedding? Is it because I dreamt of the wedding? Am I placing, and you were forced to confront that reality of whether you were really dreaming about the wedding or the marriage.
Yes.
And I think there are some people.
But wedding
there
is like a passage of a rite of passage.
Correct.
Right?
And there are some people who want what they want, and they
Yeah.
still want that big wedding, and maybe I'm sure there are people who are still waiting until the day they could have that big wedding,
Yes.
because you're getting glimmers of hope now with vaccinations
Vaccines,
and
yeah.
with all of the other progress the world is making in fighting COVID. But it's not going to be anytime soon, that's for sure. The inspiration in it is that I have taken note and have been inspired by how people have adapted. One of the weddings, and I think I told you about this earlier, one of those two weddings that I mentioned to you with the 13 people present, that wedding was early last year, actually, before the full reality of COVID had hit us, the table decor, they had tables. There were 13 people and probably about 10 tables, right?
Right.
So you could have had a table to yourself if you wanted. And I remember that I went as one of the witnesses.
Right.
Or was it? Yeah, I went as one of the witnesses, and the other witness and the wakil, because it was a Muslim wedding. We were all next to each other on separate tables.
Right.
And what I found most interesting about that wedding was the fact that they used sanitizers
Yes.
as part of the table decor, and
Yeah.
your takeaway gift was also a bottle of sanitizer. And to put that in context, this was during that time when people were hoarding and panic buying sanitizers and toilet paper and all of these things, so it wasn't readily available. So that meant something. Walking with a bottle of sanitizer in any other context would have been, these people cheap. What's wrong with them? But in that context, it worked out perfectly.
Yeah.
So I am very happy that people are still getting married, and that's the inspiration from it. But the real challenge in it and the sadness in it comes from how many vendors have been affected by
Yes.
it. And this goes beyond the wedding planners and coordinators, such as yourself, and so many other people I've had the good fortune to work with over the years, some of whom do it full time,
Yeah.
and many more of whom do it part-time or in conjunction with some other job or some other part-time job that they have. But it is revenue lost as well.
Yes, it is.
And beyond these people, you also have all of the other vendors, from the photographers who are out of work, the videographers who are out of work, the bands, the entertainers, the wedding
entertainment
singers.
industry, yes.
You know?
Yes, because I would have been hiring entertainers for all the receptions. I had to cancel, right? And it was very difficult to cancel because, it was a lot of things, a lot of different weddings that they were being hired for. You mentioned the photographers and the videographers. One of the things that, because we are in this situation, and you were saying that brides don't want to compromise on certain things, decor is one,
And the photography.
photography is one,
Yes.
videography is one. So whereas I would have had the big wedding and spending, thousands on food and desserts and all of these things, I now have to cut that down to 10 people. I now have this big chunk of money here that I can maybe put towards having better photography, even nicer videography,
Yeah.
and maybe even do an engagement shoot or, a little extra. So that is the thought process behind a lot of the brides now.
Yeah.
So, I have this extra money, I can do X, Y, and Z. So they're moving around the cash a little bit. Yes, you can save, and you will save, even though you take some of that and you put it elsewhere. So a lot of the photographers, they are getting jobs. They are. It's just that their time frames, though, I believe, have cut.
Yeah.
So it's no longer you're taking them for 8 and 10 hours, right? It's now 4 hours and that sort of thing.
If that long too.
Yeah.
Because even that second wedding I was telling you about, two things stood out to me there. One was the fact that no expense was spared on the photographer. So
Yes.
you're absolutely right. That was one of the things that the bride insisted
Yeah, because
on.
you need memories to look back on, Fazeer.
Correct.
Later on, what are you going to show your kids?
Correct. So the photography was one, and the other thing that really stood out to me is that these people were very, very, very particular with not breaching COVID rules,
Yeah.
etc. So what they did was they prepackaged the food, so nobody
Yes.
ate at the venue.
So that was another thing that that I had suggested a couple weeks back.
Yeah.
Just do the food in boxes. It's nice food,
Mm-hmm.
and they can take it away. Actually, in December we had a wedding at a temple, and the temple had that restriction. They're not allowing anybody to consume anything on the temple grounds.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to box out the food and give it to people to take away. So and the other thing I mentioned earlier about the ushering. So we had one entry and one exit route. So
Right.
and when you came in, you know, we took your temperature, we noted all the information, you got seated. When you exited where the food was, you took your box of food, you made your way around the building, back to the car park, and then left.
I saw something in the UK last year, and I remembered speaking about it on air as well because I thought it was a phenomenal idea. An Indian couple living in the UK wanted to have their typical Indian wedding. I'm not sure if you saw the story, but what they did was they rented a ground, and they've set up huge screens on the ground
Right.
and their stage. So they were the only ones who were not wearing masks.
Yeah.
And they invited however many hundred people, but you had to come in and treat it like a drive-in theater. So you were able to drive in with your vehicle. They had the parking spaces pre-assigned for everyone. You stayed in your vehicle and you looked at the wedding on the big screens at the
Right.
back of the couple. So you came in, drove in, parked, you and your family are in your bubble, you're in your car, you don't have to keep your masks on in your car. And, well, at least this is in the UK, right? That's a different story for us here. And you looked at the wedding, they were able to do everything that they wanted to do and walk around the fire, full Hindu wedding. And at the end of it, the food was then delivered to each vehicle. I'm not sure if people had the option to stay there to eat in their vehicle or if they had to leave, but everybody got their food there. And they were also able to do a drive-by. The way that the route was set
Right.
up, they were able to do a drive-by. So whilst in their vehicle, they could wave to the couple, give them their greetings. So that was one of the stories that
I
really
love
stood
that.
out because I thought this is such an incredible,
Innovative, yeah.
way to work around the system. Everybody is safe. You could still have your numbers, and who knows? Maybe Avani might be hosting the first event or wedding like
It might be
that. Might
You're
even
giving
be
me
yours, yes.
ideas.
Yeah. So I thought that was wonderful, and the reason I cited that example is because I wanna transition into the next question that I have. We've spoken about how challenging it has been, and I'm sure that everyone who has been so affected could add to the conversation and give specifics of how challenging it has been for them, specifically, But how do we get out of it? We're obviously not going to get out of this situation immediately. And when the industry starts to slowly reawaken, if I could use that terminology, a lot of the things that you spoke about are things that are going to have to come into play. So how do you, as someone with so much experience, what do you recommend that the wedding industry, the coordinators and the planners, etc., what do you recommend that they do for government and government agencies to start building a lot more trust in this industry? In other words, the barmen have a bar association. The wedding
Right.
industry doesn't have an association,
No.
so it's going to be treated on a very generic level. But if there could be some sort of evolution of a spokesman or spokesperson or somebody or entity for the vendors to say, hey, look, these are vendor standards. That's what I'm getting at, vendor
Right.
standards. What are some of the recommendations for vendor standards that you would think are needed? You've already mentioned some of them already in the pre-packaging of food and that sort of stuff. But is there anything else that really stands out that you could see yourself doing and Avani Events doing as we slowly emerge from the pandemic?
Well, in the transition out of the pandemic, because we've started the vaccines in Trinidad, and as you can see, the US, they're opening up. It's
Right.
like life is back
Almost
to
normal,
normal. One of the things, well, as you know, travel is basically limited.
Yeah.
I don't want to say stopped completely, it's limited. You mentioned a little while ago about the drive-by wedding. You know, we're doing Zoom weddings and all of these things. So I am guessing people are going to stick to smaller numbers in the future, simply because they realize now in planning and replanning and you know, rebudgeting and all of these things, they're going to see that they are seeing that, you know, I can have this, but I can do it this way.
So the 400 people aren't going to be necessary at
The
your wedding
400
anytime
people could
soon.
log on Zoom.
Right. So is it then implied that the real focus that the vendor should place their focus on customizing
Yes.
and making their package or their service offering a lot more intimate, or catering it or customizing it to a much more intimate setting?
So that has
Yep.
been happening as of late. If you look on Facebook and Instagram, you would see a lot of ads for micro weddings. So
Right.
they're providing 10 tablecloth, you know, or 10 chair covers, or 5 centerpieces, things like that.
Right.
It has been customized and it's actually quite affordable. Now, that is basic, right? Brides still want what they want, and they want elaborate, right?
Right.
In that regard, you know, it's gonna be a little bit different to what some of the packages are offering. So, in terms of standards moving forward, if it is we're all vaccinated, and that's like the best case scenario, things could basically go back to normal. But I still foresee people keeping their small weddings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of entertainment, for instance, right? Let's use that
Yeah.
as an example.
Okay.
The days of bands are not going to return anytime soon, right? Unless, of course, you're breaking a rule, bending a law, or something of the sort, which we don't recommend at all, right?
Yeah.
So, how is an artist or an entertainer who would have made their sizable chunk of income from performances at weddings in particular? How are they to adjust now? Because if I'm having a wedding with 10 people, there is no sound system
Yeah.
necessarily that would have been in place where they could have just come in,
And
jacked
plug
in,
in, yeah.
and performed.
their thing.
So now they may have to evolve to the point where they're a one-man provider.
Yes.
So they're not
Yes.
just coming there to sing, but they also have to come and provide whatever PA is required, because with 10 people you don't even need a PA.
No.
You
No,
know?
I've seen so one of the COVID style weddings I would have done before the restriction, basically, of the 10 people. We had a saxophonist come in, and he did a phenomenal job.
Right.
So during dinner, he played the music. Now, like I said, we didn't have a party afterwards, but that sort of gave you the vibe that, you know, because
Yeah.
he played soca, he played all different styles of music in his 1 hour. And that was the 1 hour for that, I think it was 25 people
Right.
to eat.
During that
And,
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to eat, get their dessert, you know, chat a little bit and then leave. So that was, I mean, musicians, they basically okay in terms of that. Once you can provide that sort of entertainment. And he was really entertaining. You know, he was going around to the tables and dancing around and that kind of thing. But artists, yeah, they basically have
So-
to come and sing on tracks.
I would like to plant that idea in your head, though, Shivanie. I'd like to plant the idea in your head of somebody stepping up, maybe you, if time permits. Maybe when you get married in a couple of months, God willing, from now on, you're able to settle down and get more done with your time. Maybe somebody grabbing the bull by the horns and setting some industry standards, because I feel like with the industry standards for wedding vendors to follow and for wedding vendors to subscribe to
Right.
say, hey, look, I am whatever wedding standard approved, right?
Right.
It may mean that the industry is able to reawaken faster, that the public will get a buy-in of trust and of confidence in these vendors and providers much more quickly. as opposed to taking it on an individual level and every individual vendor having to reinvent the wheel on their own.
Right.
You know, so maybe you could be the person to grab that bull by the horn per se, and start mapping out some industry norms, some industry guidelines. It could be done in consultation with other providers, etc. I know that's asking a lot, but you know, it's a suggestion. You know, because we all have to work together and in different ways and collaborate in different ways now to be able to get out of this together. So maybe if we could get some of the major players in the industry involved to get together and just start speaking to one another. It doesn't have to be like you set up a body per se and say, well, this is the wedding body or the Wedding Vendors Association. But it could just be the major vendors saying or issuing a joint statement saying, hey, listen, we have come up with a transition plan, and this is something we would like all vendors, wedding vendors, to subscribe to, or even if they channel it through the wedding venues,
Right.
or channel it through the IRO, and they in turn channel it through all imams, pundit, priests, etc., to ensure that however it goes, there's so many different avenues you could explore. But I feel like this is also a great opportunity for us to set some benchmark standards for the industry moving forward as well. So we could use COVID as the catalyst to really be able to set some benchmark standards, because you and I would both know that when it comes to weddings, even pre-COVID, especially pre-COVID, standards have been a very subjective thing at weddings, and it's one of the reasons that so many people have great experiences and so many more people have really poor experiences as well. And
Right.
that's a real nice transition into the next element of our conversation. Getting involved in this industry is never an easy thing, and there are many challenges that are faced on a normal day, even before the advent of COVID-19. What, in your experience, have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced as a wedding coordinator, planner, and overseer of vendors and wedding services?
Bringing fantasies to life.
Really?
What I mean by that is, you look on Pinterest, right? Pinterest is like the bride's handbook.
Right.
Everybody's on Pinterest looking through. You've seen all these fantastic, really lovely decor, and you're seeing all these things. But realistically speaking, what it costs to put out that, right, is not what is available to everybody. So your budget may be X amount, but to achieve what you want, this fantasy of having Winter Wonderland in, I don't know, in Achievers, for instance,
Right.
or Signature Hall or one of these halls, Gaston Courts, you want Winter Wonderland in here, but your budget does not accommodate that.
So it's a classic case of champagne taste on Moby budget.
I didn't want to say that. But I mean, having dreams and fantasies is all well and fine. Sitting down and actually understanding. Now, I know for most of these brides, it's their first time, right? So I don't expect you to know certain things. So what we do is we meet with them and, we have a conversation. Okay, tell me what you like. Tell me what you want. How do you envision your day, right? And from that, let's talk budget.
Mm-hmm.
All right? So, yes, your budget is realistic. No, it's not. If you do this, so we try to focus on things. If your budget cannot accommodate all of the elements that you want, let's focus on what is most important to you. Where you're sitting, that stage, that is the most important part to you. Or some people may say, okay, yes, where I'm sitting, but when people enter, I want the wow factor. I want them to, see everything, or I don't want them to see the stage as yet. I want them to go to the cocktail area, different things. So that's why the consultation to me is the most important part before we get to that. Some people just call and say, hi, Avani Events. I want to get a cost for 1,200 for 120 people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you want.
Yeah.
right? I could tell you $1,000. You
And,
say,
that,
okay,
and then
yes.
they may think that you're withholding information, or you don't want to reveal your price or something of the
Yeah,
sort.
well,
and-
that is it, right? A lot of people think that you just don't want to give them a price, but I can't give you a price if I don't know what you want.
Yeah, because then they're going to hold you to that price later, even as they
Yes.
add
Yes.
different elements or more elements to their list of demands.
Let's just say I say, Fazeer, or you call me up, Shivanie, I'm having 100 people at my wedding. What's that going to cost me? I say, Fazeer, it's going to cost you $10,000. Cool, right? 100 people. Your expectation and what I have in my mind is two different things, right? So it may be that you have grand ideas and you're thinking that you're going to get this and that, and when you come, I put up balloons.
Yeah.
I'm just being ridiculous.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what I'm saying is, so that's why you need to have the initial conversation. What do you want? Sit down, speak to whoever you're hiring for your wedding. Speak to them, let them understand. Both of us need to be on the same page. Right? That being said, challenges we're speaking of. The challenging part is the bride knows what she wants. The groom sometimes is neither here nor there, or sometimes he's very much involved and they're basically on the same page. In comes the bride's mom, in comes the groom's mom, who maybe never had a wedding, or didn't have the wedding that they thought they may have had, or they're looking at ZTV and seeing all these fantastic things. They're looking at Pinterest as well. They're on Facebook and Instagram, and they have different ideas. So I envision my daughter walking through this, flower wall, or walking through this and walking into whatever, right? They have visions as well. The challenges come when they are the ones footing the bill. Because if I'm footing the bill, I'm paying for that. I want what I want. So,
I think you kind of hit the nail. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. And I smiled when you were saying it, because whenever I meet with couples for their programs leading into weddings and that sort of stuff, right? Whenever I meet with them, I always insist that I meet with the couple only.
Yes.
And never any of the in-laws.
Yes.
And when I meet with them, a part of my contract with them is that the couple appoints one person.
Did you read my contract?
No, never did.
I swear I have the same
couple
thing.
must appoint one person and one person only,
Liaison.
who we shall call their coordinator on the day, right, or their spokesperson on the day. Who could liaise with me, because there will be times, obviously, when the couple busy in ceremony or whatever.
Yes.
So who is the person that I am to liaise with or deal with? And I'm letting the couple know by contract as well that I'm not taking instructions from anybody else, because that has been problematic in the past.
Yes.
You have an auntie or an uncle or a mom or a dad who will come up to you on the day and say, hey, add this to the program, or do this, or don't say this, or include this person, or do that. And then everything goes topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, you have maybe the bride or the groom asking, hey, where that come from? Or why did this happen this way? Or why you allow that person? So we go through that process, because that is one of the biggest issues, where the parents or the intended in-laws, parents of either the bride or the groom, are getting involved, and they all have different desires or different end desired outcomes.
Let me give you a story, right? And this is a story. It's not exaggerated. Like, I am not exaggerating any point in this story. I met with a couple. Very, very, very lovely couple. They're very young, but they're professionals, right? So one was a doctor, one is a doctor, right? I can't remember the job spec of the groom, but anyway, we had our conversations. We met. Everything was decided upon. Cool. Because they're both professionals and they're working so much, they were unable to meet with me at certain points in time.
Right.
I have no issues with that. And I told them, so this is where that part of my contract came in with the liaison, right? One person shall be appointed to liaise with the event planner.
Right.
And the person's name is on the contract and their contact number is on the contract as well.
Right.
This is the person who is approved to make decisions on your behalf. Right. Who you trust 100% and will make decisions that you will agree with. Right? Cool. So I met with this couple. Everything is in place. She called me and she said, hey, Shivanie, if you're up on my side, pass to collect the down payment, please. All right, so I didn't collect a down payment for the first, which I usually do, right? When we sign contract, I normally collect the down payment. So I said, no problem, I'll be up on Sunday, I'll pass. Sunday I went, and she was giving me a check. So I went, and I thought I walked into a family luncheon. So, I sort of stepped back and I'm like, if you have people over, it's fine. I will settle this another day, right? And she said, no, it's fine. Come. So I was there. Avin was there with me, right? And he came in as well. We sat down, had something to drink. I didn't realize that I was in the middle of, I don't even know how to term it. Like, they bombarded me with so many different things. It was the girl's parents, the boy's parents, the neighbor, the aunt, and whoever else was there. And it was a Hindu wedding we were planning. So she wanted white because she wanted to stand out, right? And I understand that you're wearing this lovely gold and red with a little bit of pink on it, and he's wearing whatever he's wearing, but you want to stand out in that mandap, so you want just gold and white. And everything was set for Fazeer. And when I went there, one of them was saying, well, you know what? This is a Bollywood wedding. It needs to be a lot of colors. Bollywood is known for pinks and oranges and all these bright, brilliant, sort of weird colors that just happen to work for a Bollywood wedding. They wanted all the colors. And Fazeer, this is like not too long away from the wedding, right? So no problem. Okay, you all want this? I mean, I sat there and I literally felt bombarded, right? Collected the check and left. I left not feeling as good as I felt when I came there. Like, not feeling 100% about this wedding anymore. And I decided to call her up in the week and I said, hey, remember we spoke about the one person being, the person to make decisions for you. Who would you assign? She said, her mom. No problem. The problem there was the boy's parents were paying 50%. The girl's parents were paying 50%. Who had the majority?
Yeah.
Nobody, right? So I heard from the girl's mom, who changed every aspect of the wedding drastically. I heard from the boy's mom, who said, I don't agree with that. I want back to plan A. And then there was pulling and tugging there, right? Now, pulling and tugging, Fazeer,
But that is also symptomatic, Shivanie, I think, of issues that the couple may likely face in the future.
Later on in life.
And it also says that the couple, as a unit, they have not yet garnered the testicular fortitude of sorts to be able to take their own stand as one unit, simply because they must be able to step back and see it from a neutral perspective. How do you expect your coordinator or any other provider to give you what it is that you want when what you want is not made clear or is diluted by what everybody else wants?
Yeah.
I mean, it's easier to say if what you want is to please everybody, then you know what? No problem. Let's do a dipstick and find out what everybody wants, and let's try to find our best compromise.
Yeah.
But don't pretend to say that you want something, and that's going to change every 5 minutes.
Well, it was changing daily to a point where I just refunded, full refund. And because it was becoming, to me, it was becoming too much. It was overwhelming me. Right?
Yeah.
This one wedding that was so simple to pull off and was so, we already had everything in place. Now you're telling me a week before the wedding that I need to change?
Yeah, so what you got into there wasn't a wedding. You got into a family conflict.
What I did, honestly, I refunded and I recommended somebody else.
Wow.
Right? The person I recommended called me, why you send these people by me?
Yeah.
But I recommended that person because I knew he was capable of doing the wedding and, pulling off all of these aspects, right? Apart from the fact that mothers get involved and it's sort of, you sort of have the as you said, topsy-turvy kind of thing happening. I have noticed, and this is so real, when we do weddings, the bride and the groom, they really see who support them 100% and who, may be a little bit envious or whatever the case is. Because I've seen where sisters stop talking to each other. I've seen where family members have all these
So you know what, Shivanie? I think it's safe to say that you and I both have some collective experience in this, and I'm sure
Definitely.
we have a lot of stories to share.
Yeah.
So let's get into some specifics of some stories, simply because I think these individual stories would serve as examples of some of the issues that many people aren't even aware that exist or aren't aware that wedding vendors face. And it might be preparation or a heads up for other younger couples and families to know, well, hey, listen, these are things we need to talk about beforehand, before we
Yeah.
go to the coordinator, or things that we need to work out on our own. So we're going to get into that one story at a time right after this. Okay, so welcome back to season 2, episode 2 of Trini Inspiration. We're talking today with wedding planner and coordinator Shivanie Harripersad of Avani Events, and we've spoken about quite a lot. We've tried to get an assessment of where the industry stands at present, how things have changed, how people have been affected, vendors have been affected, and maybe even planted the idea of some sort of transition plan, and maybe some sort of collaboration amongst vendors to develop a transition plan that the industry may be able to adapt to or adopt altogether, to make things a lot more flexible and a lot more COVID compliant, to help us to transition at a faster pace as an industry, instead of each vendor having to redefine the wheel, as they say. But our conversation has also transitioned as well to a point where I think it's only fair and fitting that, having identified what are some of the major issues that wedding vendors face, that we give some very specific examples. And who doesn't like a good story, right? And between Shivanie and myself, we have some really incredible stories to share of what are some of the things that go wrong and have gone wrong at weddings, things that some couples may have predicted or have averted, and things that some people may be absolutely clueless to, as to what happens behind the scenes. Because for the most part, the wedding vendors that I've worked with across Trinidad and Tobago, they do quite a decent job of hiding a lot of the things that happen behind the scenes. So let's trade some stories, Shivanie. And would you like? But I think it's only fair and fitting that you start first.
Oh, ladies first? Oh.
Ladies first. Ladies first.
Okay, so in terms of, challenges and things going wrong and that sort of thing, the first one that comes to mind, Fazeer, is a bride. Okay, so you hire vendors for your wedding, right? You are supposed to trust these people.
Right. Else,
Right.
why are you paying them?
Why are you paying somebody that you do not trust and you want to micromanage? You are not available on the day. You're busy getting hair, makeup done, all of these things, sprucing up yourself. You are supposed to be stress-free on that day. Hence, the reason you hired us, right? I had a bride who called me and said to me, I want the DJ to be in a spot where nobody can see him. The music must sound like it's just coming from the sky. Okay. So, number one, we are not in a club. The DJ is not going to be hidden, right? Number two, a DJ, as you know, Fazeer, being on radio and whatnot, a DJ feeds off the crowd.
Right.
It feeds off of the energy of the crowd, what the crowd wants. Requests are obviously entertained at a wedding, it's a wedding. People want to hear certain things and that sort of thing. So, and they want a little shout out too, while you're in the wedding, somebody might be celebrating a birthday, give them a little shout out. And I said to her, okay, but I, as the MC, need to have a visual of the DJ, and we need to have that rapport, right? And you would know that from being an MC yourself, right? We need to interact with the DJ, even if it's by a look or a little, motion, body motion, whatever the case is. And she just wanted the music to come from the sky. She wanted the DJ behind the step, and he wanted the DJ. The DJ told me, he said, Shivanie, hear this, right? I could pack up my stuff and leave now. I am not tolerating this. That being said, same bride. I gave the photographer, the photo booth people, an area to set up in. Didn't know she called them and she changed that, right? And put them by the toilets. So the entrance to the toilets, they were just right outside there because everything had to be at one level where you could see everything. And I said, we can't put them there because number one, it's not sanitary to have them there. And it's not logistically possible to have them there when you have people entering the hall. They're just going to be in the way, right? She didn't want that. Photo booth people told me, listen, I could pack up and leave, I don't need this. Because they were so upset. Fazeer, that being said, the caterers were upset, the DJ was upset, the photo booth people were upset. I was upset because I was yelled at. I was screamed at, right? And she said to me, this is not your wedding. I said, yes, but you hired me for a reason. This is not my wedding, but it's not my first. I've done this hundreds of times before. Trust in what I'm telling you. After that, I stopped answering her calls. I did exactly what I felt was right to do on that day. Put the DJ stage side. The caterers sat up where they wanted to. The photo booth people went in their corner that they were comfortable with. And when she came in, the doors opened. She was like, oh my God, I'm going to cry. So I thought immediately, okay, something is wrong. So I asked her, I said, what happened? She's like, it just looks so beautiful. I said nothing. And at the end of the night, she came to me and she said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry,
So
this is really the better.
have you had a lot of experiences where your brides have turned into bridezillas?
So I was told recently there is no such thing as a bridezilla, that it's just a bride who really, 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 really knows what she wants.
No, I disagree respectfully. I have to say I've been fortunate in that I don't think that too many of the couples that I've interacted with over the years have been bridezillas of sorts.
Right.
I think we hit the nail on the head earlier when you said that the major issue is really dealing with family dynamics.
Yes.
But I have had one or two bridezillas and one. I don't want to call him a groomzilla, but I had one experience where the groom was more vested in the wedding and was planning the wedding and was taking care of everything for the wedding, and the bride was just showing up. It was a complete reversal of roles.
Why is that not me?
But I'll give you some examples from one girl who I don't want to say that she's a bridezilla. She was a very nice young lady. But I think that her idea of the kind of planning that was required for the wedding, I think she really went overboard, and the word is micromanage. She tried to micromanage everything. So I got hired for the job, and we met, we had the consult, etc., and we talked about everything. And from the consult, I don't remember what happened exactly, but I remember walking away from that consult thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be one of those. And lo and behold, about a week or so later, when I got the email from them with the information, I ended up getting a spreadsheet from them.
Right.
And I kid you not when I tell you that this, she's laughing already, she knows the story, that this spreadsheet, Shivanie, came, it was a spreadsheet of what was going to happen the day before the wedding and the day of the wedding.
Right.
And that spreadsheet provided information on 8 o'clock, wake up, brush teeth. At this time, this is happening. At this time, that is happening.
Very organized.
Exceedingly organized. And I'm like, but why are you sending this to me? I don't need all this information.
Right.
I'm showing up for your program, which is happening at whatever time, at whatever venue. But I got all of it. And according to that spreadsheet, I was supposed to have been at the location about 2 hours before the wedding was set to arrive there. Anyways, fast forward, when you get these sorts of spreadsheets and messages, if you have been in this business long enough, you already know what's going to happen. These are the weddings where the most disasters happen, where the most things go wrong, as opposed to the others where the couple is a bit more trusting or has a bit more of a laissez-faire kind of attitude.
I think those come off better for Fazeer. The ones with the laissez-faire sort of attitude, the day
they're more
just
spontaneous.
flows. The day just flows and everything happens according to
how it should.
Yeah.
And it unfolds with good energy too,
and
as opposed to this very sort of rigid energy.
Yes.
Anyways, so I was told beforehand, that the girl is a planner and she does events and stuff like that for where she works, right? She's not an event planner, but she plans things at her office, etc. And I was also told that she has a cousin from another country who is a wedding planner and coordinator, etc. Lo and behold, on the day of the wedding, that cousin and all the other cousins came, and they were more interested in being a part of the wedding than in
Yes.
coordinating or doing anything. And here are some of the highlights of what happened at that wedding. This was supposed to be a Muslim wedding. The girl who was getting married was not Muslim. She's the one who hired me for the wedding, so she was briefed fully by me on what to expect, etc. They showed up at the venue. She showed up at the venue with a limo, but the limo was too big to go around the venue
Yes.
to where she was supposed to exit
Okay.
exit the limo and
Yeah,
enter the
enter
building.
Yeah.
Nobody in her family, right, came out to help. It was
Yeah.
myself and the imam who came in the rain and organized a TIDA for her to swap vehicles and jump from the limo into the TIDA to go around the building.
Right.
When she gets to the building now mind you, you're a planner. You're supposed to take care of all of these things, right? These are the things that somebody who is new to this wouldn't necessarily think about.
of,
But
yeah.
these are the practical things that your planners and coordinators take care of. So she gets to the other side of the building. Now, mind you, the hall is open, but the door that she is supposed to enter from
locked.
to go into the bride's quarters is locked.
Yeah.
The security guard for the building doesn't have the
key,
key
yeah.
for that room, and whoever she made the arrangements with only works during office hours,
Yes.
Monday to Friday, 8 to 4.
Yes.
So you now have no access to this room. You would know that when we go to events like these, you do all that is possible, and sometimes many things above and beyond what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do to make things happen, because that's just how you roll. This is the level of professionalism. I kicked in a door at the venue, and yeah, I
So
kicked
they're looking on and they're going to charge you for that.
I kicked in a door at the venue, and let's just say it was the oldest room with a lot of junk packed
Yeah.
in there, cobwebs, etc. But it was the only room that was available. So she's already late. Wedding is ready to start. The groom is seated at the top of the stage, and we're waiting. Why are we waiting? Because her makeup artist started her makeup, and before they left home, and was supposed to get to the venue to do finishing touches, but instead took a detour to go and do another bride.
Yes, that happens.
Before coming here. Shivanie, we had to wait about an hour, or the better part of an hour or more, for that makeup artist to come. Mind you, all this time, the groom is seated at the
Waiting,
stage, on
yeah.
the stage, waiting, right? And the bride is not moving.
I feel like we have such similar stories, Fazeer.
Nothing is happening. She refuses to move until the makeup artist comes to finish the
Yeah.
job. The crowd is getting restless. Most of them are drinking outside, you know.
Right.
And this is what happened. Now, mind you, when I met with them, I briefed her and I told her about what to expect in the Muslim wedding, etc., and that sort of stuff. So you would know that in a Muslim wedding, there's supposed to be two witnesses and what is known as the wakil, or the person who's
Yeah.
giving away the bride per se, right? Just to break that down to layman's terms. And that wakil, that main person, is supposed to be somebody that the bride is familiar with, but must be Muslim, right? She had nobody arranged on her side
Did you step in?
to play this role, even though I would have briefed her on all of
Yeah.
this. So from being the MC, I was thereafter the caretaker of all of these other things, and I had to be the wakil for her wedding as well, to stand in on her behalf. Now, these are all very important things, but sometimes brides get so caught up in the color of the flowers
Yes.
and the bouquet,
Yes.
and the dishes must match, and the decorations have to look this way, because they have a winter wonderland, like you said, in their head, that all of these practical things are not taken into consideration.
Yeah.
You know, so that was one example
Fazeer,
of a day
sometimes-
that a day where I felt like I was at this wedding and Murphy was officiating. Murphy from Murphy's Law. Everything that could go wrong will go wrong. I feel like Murphy was present at that wedding.
Fazeer, sometimes I feel that we are severely underpaid, because some of the extra things that we do and go all out in doing, sometimes the brides are unaware. The grooms are unaware until after the wedding, when we have our little, like you like to say, postmortem.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we sit down and do the postmortem, and they were like, "Oh, you did that? Oh, that happened?" They're so unaware. I mean, guests are unaware as well. But the amount of things that we do apart from what we're hired to do
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the major issues I have when it comes to programs at weddings, I actually have and I have this conversation with every single couple that I meet with, right? I actually have a lot of issues with DJs.
Right.
Yeah, so beg your pardon, I do have a lot of issues with DJs at weddings simply because, you know the old saying, you had one job?
Yes.
So I cannot understand for the life of me how it is that a DJ, whilst the wedding program is in progress, and all you have to do is press play when that time rolls around for you to play the entrance song or to play the cake cutting song or the first dance song.
Right.
I can't understand how it is at that point in time you're like, well, we'll cross over to the DJ. And I never like to say that. I always prefer a
Yes.
visual cue.
Yes. Yes.
But sometimes you do say it. And when you say it, you then have to wait for them to find the song, for them to cue the song, or for
So-
them to then send a message to ask, what is the song?
Yeah, yeah.
This is crazy.
So-
This is absolutely crazy.
As you said that about the DJ, Fazeer, I remember being on stage. This was a wedding that the girl had hired me for about 2 weeks before her wedding, right? So we sat down, we did the program, everything. I communicated all this information to the DJ because I normally take his number and I'm in communication with him before the wedding. So this is what I expect. Because my face is going up there, it's my name, I don't want to look like an idiot. So we had this conversation. Now, she hired a DJ from her village because that's what she was doing for her wedding. She said, these people, you know, they say it takes a village to raise somebody.
Yeah.
She wanted people from her village to come and do things for her wedding, and she was giving them the business. Cool, no problem. The DJ came, he sat there, and I was on stage, and I remember the photographer, because he knew me really well. He said, girl, I saw your face, and I just had to move that camera from on your face. Because he was on his phone, Fazeer, and I just announced we're going to have the cutting of the cake. Two of them standing there and waiting, and nothing is happening, nothing at all. There was another time where the DJ, he brought his girlfriend with him. So they're sitting there and very close to each other and chatting. And I'm there announcing whatever, if it was the first dance. Yeah, I think it was the first dance because they were waiting. Nothing.
Well, I think I have a story that could give you a one-up on that. And for that story, my wife was actually at this wedding with me. Shivanie, we went to a wedding. I think I even called you that day because I was trying. Yes, I called you that day as well during the course of the wedding. Yes. Imagine going to a wedding, and people will find this to be ludicrous. But this is the kind of, let me use the correct word. This is the kind of dotishness that you sometimes have to deal with certain vendors and providers who really shouldn't be called wedding vendors at all. They should never be hired for these sorts of things. I show up at the wedding, and the DJ who's hired for the wedding comes with everything and no microphone. There is no microphone at the wedding.
So allow me to say this, right? A DJ is a DJ is a DJ. They can play music for a party. A DJ for a program is a different it's a different thing altogether. And you know that. You know, you carry on programs, right? So you understand how a program goes. Dead air is something I absolutely, absolutely detest.
Correct.
I don't want to be on stage and have dead air. You know, I mean, we're speaking. As soon as we're done speaking and we announce a song, we want the song to play. Right? It must be flawless. It must be
5
seamless.
seconds of dead air could feel like eternity. And it's very unprofessional. And this is what turns a program into a production.
Yes.
And with the number of years we've been doing this, you don't want anything, and you aren't willing to settle for anything that is less than a production quality event, a production quality program. And girl, honestly, the DJs are really one of my biggest issues. So apart from showing up at a wedding with no mic and then giving me the lousy, lame excuse of, well, you know, we have 4 events today. This is the 4th one and I only have 3 mics. So I had asked the people over here.
Take 3 events.
So exactly. So then take 3 events or go rent another mic. Get another one. You can't just show up at the wedding without a mic.
Yeah.
So imagine me now, thankfully I have a big mouth and I could throw my voice. So I had to stand there and host the show to shout to the end of the garage to be able to get everybody to hear. But whilst I may be able to do that, what about all the other people who are coming to speak or to be a part of this program? They can't do the same.
And it's already an issue to get people to put a mic to their mouth when they're giving a speech. they have it all the way down by their
Yeah.
chest.
Yeah.
So now asking them to speak without a microphone, I mean, look at how that's going to be.
And you would know as well too that another peeve that I have with the DJs, and I don't mean to be picking on them, but it's really one of the biggest issues when the program is in progress, right? But another peeve, we use this as an example in the broadcasting boot camps that we've done, is the fact that many times over, a DJ does not look at his or her crowd and assess the crowd and go from there.
For the type of music.
And I think they come with the template in their mind that, oh, yeah, we're going to the wedding. Yeah, I have a wedding set. I could play the wedding set, or I'll play whatever. But mood is very important.
Music is mood. We know
And
that.
the mood is determined by so many things. It's determined by how well the program flowed,
Yeah.
what mood the people came in, what the weather is like outside, what
Yeah.
are the circumstances around this wedding, and when I talk about the demographics, like the makeup of the people,
Yes.
I've gone to so many weddings, and I'm using Muslim weddings as an example because I think I've been to more Muslim weddings than most, right?
Right.
And I've gone to so many Muslim weddings where DJs are present, and instead of trying to work their way or reading the crowd and realizing, well, okay, this is a predominantly conservative audience here. Let's start with this and work our way up.
Right.
Yes, the bride and groom want a party at the end of it, but right now we have all the aunties and uncles sitting to
Right.
eat. So let me play some nice vibesy music. No, they want from the start. They want they hard pong. And
Yes.
and you know what, Shivanie? They compensate good music with volume.
Yes.
So when they can't play good music, their
Up the
excuse
volume.
is they want to send the volume up. And one of the things that they say very often is, "Wait, boy, this crowd they have no vibe, boy." But they fail to realize that they are the ones who have to create the vibe.
Yes. So,
You know?
Fazeer, that is your reason why now, especially if I have to MC a wedding, I insist on using Avin. Because as a service that we provide, so now we do it as a package. Right? One of my packages is DJ and MC. Because I don't want to be on the stage saying something and then my DJ, looking, studying the girl he bring, or to be on his phone to message the same girl that didn't come, or whatever the case is. So Avin knows my cues. He know when I look at him exactly what to play, when to play it,
Yeah.
how to play it, right?
And people might think that we oversimplifying this issue or that we're
It's not.
exaggerating
It's
the
not.
issue, but it's not. And the other thing that came to mind is the fact that I remember going to one wedding where they hired a top DJ, right?
Right.
This is
Yeah.
a very well branded DJ.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is the branded DJ is usually not present for the program.
No, he's a
the
guest.
branded DJ is usually going to come
Yeah.
for the party
Yes.
or the after party, and he
Guest,
normally
yeah.
gets just like a technical operator or somebody from his crew to come and play the
Yes.
songs during the course of the program.
Yeah.
And what happens is that even though you as the couple would have dealt with the DJ that you hired, and you would have said, okay, these are the songs that I have for the dance and the this and the that, right? That gets lost in translation, and that may not trickle down from the DJ you
Yeah.
hired to the person who's operating
technical
now.
operator,
So now
yeah.
the technical operator doesn't know which file or folder it's in, has lost the song, can't get that version of the song, and it has gotten so bad, Shivanie, to the point where when I meet with couples now, I have to tell them, make sure you don't just ask your DJ if he has the song. You get the exact version of the song that
Yes,
you
and
want,
send it to them.
email it to them, put it on a flash drive, give it to them,
Something.
make sure they have it, something of the sort, you know.
So, yeah.
But it's because you have to make sure, because at the end of it, you're not going to get a chance to replay it, you know.
No,
You're not going to get a chance to relive the moment, and they're going to mess it up for you forever.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's what I was telling you. So you mentioned the word production before, right? I always use that term when explaining to brides how we're going to pull off this program. This program has to be flawless. It's not going to be me saying, okay, now it's time for the dance. Okay, now it's time for the cutting of the cake. That's not going to happen, right? It's going to be seamless. It has to be from the moment you enter the hall with your entrance song. Everything has to flow in such a way that nobody realizes, wait, now we've been through 4 speeches and so on, we're
Yeah.
already here. It has to be flawless. It has to be entertaining. It has to be a certain way, right? And that production feel is what would make or break your program. You know, that feel of not even realizing, wait, we've been through half an hour of a program already.
Correct.
You know, and to me, that's the wow factor that people get when they sit through a program, because sitting through a program can be boring as hell.
Especially when the program is thrown together vibe, because some
Yeah.
people, they focus on so many other aspects of it, so they may be more interested in the party, and the program is just something that they have to endure, so they didn't take any time to piece a program together properly.
Yeah.
So that's another factor. But then there's another one, and you were messaging me while I was at this particular wedding where it took an hour and 20 something minutes or an hour and a half just for the bridal entry. Do you
Yeah.
remember that wedding?
Oh my goodness, yes.
You had some friends who were at that wedding and they told you that I was the MC at the wedding.
Yeah.
And folks who are listening on or who are looking on will think that that is ludicrous and it's an
Yeah,
exaggeration, but I swear to
no.
you that it's not. This bridal party took an hour and 20 minutes minimum just to do their entrances because every
Everybody had a
single
different,
member
yeah.
of the bridal party had a 5-minute song, a 3 to 5
Yeah.
minute song, and they all had their own dances that they
Yes.
wanted to do, etc.
Yes.
And on top of that, we had a program that was about 2 hours long.
Yeah.
This program in its entirety from the bridal party entrance until the vote of thanks was over 3 hours long.
And yet you don't want to pay your MC, right?
You know, and not just the MC, but you know, it also says, and these are things that we speak to our clients about before. It also shows a bit of discourtesy towards your
Yes,
guests.
yes.
You know, like you haven't taken them into consideration. And speaking of that, I'll jump the gun and also say one of the types of weddings that I try to stay away from. The weddings where they break in the middle to go do a photo shoot, right? I'm not dictating.
They're not coming back
I am
anytime
not
soon.
exactly. I am not dictating to you when to do and what to do. If you want to
Right.
break and go do a photo shoot, no problem. But let us at least be realistic, right? First of all, if you're going to break for a photo shoot after your ceremony and then come back to start the reception, I am not coming for the ceremony.
Yes.
I will come for the
The
reception.
reception, yeah.
Secondly, please do not fool yourself into thinking that your photo shoot is going to be 1
1
hour
hour.
long. Because you have to exit the hall, get into your vehicle, go to your venue, and it's not just take out camera and snap. Lighting has to be has
Set up,
to
yeah.
be set up. Then you're going to get your makeup touched up. Then all your family members who you want to take photos with also have to leave
Yes.
the venue, and they're going to stop by somebody's trunk and do this and that and the other. And all this while, your guests are already seated, thinking that you're going to be back within an hour
Getting
as
annoyed,
promised,
yeah.
and they're getting annoyed.
So what I had done for one of these weddings, because when they went to the venue for their photo shoots, we just did dinner. We did dinner because people were hungry.
And that's the
People
thing.
were extremely hungry. Now, yes, you had tea plates and whatnot, but that tea plate is not enough after
Yeah.
you sat through an hour of a ceremony. Then you have this cocktail style, hour and a half. People are still hungry, and then
Yeah.
they took extra time. I remember one wedding, Fazeer, you mentioned the limo, where the limo guy, he lied. So, I mean, we could only control so much, right? The limo left St. Helena, and he didn't tell us that he left late. We assumed he left on time because we messaged him, hey, you left? Yeah, cool. Okay, on the way. Then he messaged to say there was traffic. He didn't leave St. Helena's yet when he said there was traffic. And I was like, how come there's traffic on the highway, boy? One of our guests came from somewhere up north and said, no. Look, I reached down here in an hour in San Fernando. The limo guy was 4 hours late. The groom was on the stage panicking because he didn't have any contact with the bride because nobody gave him a phone, right?
Yeah.
I was the one in contact with the bride. The bride's father was freaking out because this limo didn't reach out to pick up his daughter. When the limo got there, picked up his daughter and came to the venue, couldn't enter the venue because of the angle, so had to go and turn and come back, and that took another hour because in San Fernando there was traffic. It was a Saturday. It was a Saturday afternoon. They had guests, these are guests that were ministers and whatnot. Fazeer, eat. They had to eat.
Yeah.
People were already waiting 4 hours, right? So we just did dinner, and during dinner she arrived, and everything just went as normal after that. But it was ridiculous, 4 hours, and it was no fault of the brides, no fault of the grooms, no fault of anybody directly, associated with the wedding. It was the fault of the limo driver.
Yeah. And these are all issues that vendors have under their belt in terms
Yeah.
of you've seen it all, you've experienced it all, and yet still you're still surprised from time to time by
Yeah.
the new things that crop up. But a first-time bride or couple, cannot begin to fathom, cannot begin to imagine. And the whole crux of this conversation is to say to those first-time brides and grooms that you really do have to have more trust. In your providers, especially when your providers are people of good repute and are people of experience or who have considerable experience under their belts. Because there are some stories that you just would not know of. This sounds like a good one. What's this one about?
So this particular bride, lovely young lady, so like a lot of the brides that I've worked with, we still keep in contact with each other, right? So much so that I've become like family to some, right? So this particular bride had her wedding and she hired a caterer.
Right.
And I say caterer with open quotes because not every cook is a caterer.
Correct.
So these people provided plastic plates, right? And so get this. The bride, the reception happened. Now the DJ that they hired wasn't through us. They hired me just as an MC. The DJ was hired externally, but he did a good job. I had no issues with him. After the program, people went to eat. Had no roti because they did Indian food, right? It was a Christian wedding, but they had Indian food. So no roti, right? They had to wait, I don't know how long, for another cooler roti to come because the lady who cooked the food said, I wasn't expecting so much of people. So when we said we were catering for 120 people, what did you think it was going to be, right? Okay, fine. The roti eventually came because people, I could tell you, Avin came at the wedding with me and he sat down and he ate the chana and stuff with a spoon. He was like, I can't wait for no roti, I'm real hungry, right? So anyway, apart from that, then the people that she hired to serve was her family members, like her nieces and whatnot. While the bride was tossing the bouquet, which, again, the DJ and I were handling that part, when she tossed the bouquet, one of the girls dropped what she was doing and ran in, caught the flowers and ran back out. I kid you not. She caught the flowers and she ran back out. And then the bride turned around, she had this shocked expression on her face, and I was shocked. She was like, who caught it? What was I supposed to say, Fazeer?
Yeah.
So somebody went and eventually spoke to the girl and took it back from her. They were busy eating all the desserts. Like these people who came with the caterer. Well, I'm saying caterer, the cook.
Right.
Right? They're busy eating the desserts and things like that. You know, and I was just, I don't know, I was blown away with this wedding, this particular wedding. And right now, well, they're married. They've been married a few years now, and things are going good with them. But that particular incident just turned their wedding into like, a laughing stock, basically. You telling me you are hired and you're running in to catch the bouquet? Why?
So I will also add this to the conversation.
Professionalism.
Whilst there are many other stories I could share with you, I'll tell you this, right? There is one wedding in particular that I either dread to do or in many instances will refuse to do.
Mine?
And those no. And those are those are actually the that's actually the house weddings.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, right? When something goes wrong in a program, right, and you're the host, most people take it or sort of bundle you together with anything that happens on the program, right? Although you're just executing a program for the people, right? And I've found over the years that weddings that are done at somebody's house, especially village weddings that are done at somebody's house, they tend to be the most difficult weddings to be an MC for. Simply because at those weddings, your crowd is not usually an attentive crowd.
No.
You usually have most of the men at the back drinking somewhere. There's a lot of talk in the background. People are cross-talking, even in front of the thing, Yeah,
the whole vibe is different. Yeah.
Correct. And even the couple, if they want to do certain things, I try to dissuade them from it because it never works. So doing very romantic things that you would do in a program in a hall is not going to work out for you at a house wedding. It very rarely, if ever at all does. But it all depends on your crowd.
Yeah.
If your crowd is a decent crowd, if your crowd is a respectful crowd, but when your crowd is for want of better terminology, a village crowd where everybody's just coming in and everybody's still doing their own thing and whatever, and there is no respect given for what's happening, it usually works out for the worst. The last village wedding I did like that. The bride and groom didn't hire me. It was actually the grandmother of the bride and groom. She hired me to come host the reception after the Muslim nikah, as a surprise to her
Right.
grandchildren.
Aw.
Shivanie, I spoke with the grandma before, whatever, and mind you, she had a way with words where my bookings go through an agent, right?
Right.
So she spoke with the agent and she real butter him up, man. So we're doing this at literally next to nothing for her
Right.
because his
Yeah.
heart is soft. He's like, here's grandma and whatever and
Oh,
whatever,
gosh.
right? So, okay, no problem. It's a midweek wedding. I think it's a Wednesday afternoon. I insist on a program beforehand, but grandma has no access to email or anything of the sort. So grandma assured me that when I get there on the day, she'll have one ready for me. I get there on the day. The imam was supposed to finish the wedding, conclude, and there would have been an interlude period before passing over to starting the program. The imam instead, however, finishes the wedding and introduces me immediately. Right? Mind you, I got there and there is no program. In fact, not only there is no program, there was no program planned. Grandma had no program written, but the couple also didn't intend to do a program after this wedding. And I get introduced, and it was a surprise to every single person there except grandma. And I'm introduced to host this program, but there is no program written.
Oh, gosh.
So what am I to do? Because you have a reputation. You
Yes.
can't go there
Yes.
and say, hey, we're not prepared, or give us 2 minutes. Shivanie, you know the saying, you pull something out of your... That's literally what I did. I had the couple taking selfies with the audience as part of the program. I tricked the audience into believing that they were getting door prizes, right? When instead I got them to come up, and then each of the people who came up thinking that they were getting prizes had to do
A
something
speech?
as part of the program. One person spoke, one person sung, one person danced.
Okay.
And this was how we made it happen. And I added some humor in between. I was able to
Well, that's
add
from
some.
years of experience with different things, being on air, being a host.
Correct. Correct.
MCing different events.
And I guarantee you, Shivanie, by the end of that day, right, by the end of that program, there was no one in that audience
That knew?
except grandma and the bride and groom who would have known that there was no program and that this entire thing was made up on the spur of the moment.
Yeah, on the spot, yeah.
And I share that because these are, again, some of the issues, just the tip of the iceberg of things that we face in the industry.
Yeah.
So bottom line, folks, when you're planning your wedding, when COVID is no more, or when we are able to transition out of this and we're able to return to some semblance of normalcy and we start flooding to the halls, etc. again, and planning our grandiose weddings, our dream weddings, etc. Spare a thought for the professionals. If you're hiring professionals, whether to work for your company or to work for your wedding, you're paying them for a reason. You're paying them because they add value. You're paying them because they come with experience and knowledge and insights that you don't necessarily have. You have to trust them and trust their word for it.
And have the conversations with every single person you hire.
Correct.
Right? If you go through an event planner, better yet, because we would have the conversations with the other vendors.
Yes.
But if you're hiring, because some people like to be very hands-on, right?
Yeah.
So if you're hiring and you're hiring that caterer, make sure they know to work with proper cutlery, right? Make sure they know that you want warmers, you don't
Yeah.
want foil trays.
Yeah.
Make sure they know not to work with the big aluminum pot full of chana, but have it displayed nicely. Make sure that you have this conversation because they're just going to assume. Remember, some of them are not accustomed, and you can't blame them if they don't know, right? Because you need to have that conversation with them.
Yeah. Toots, this has been, and I say Toots for the benefit of those who don't know, that's one of the many nicknames that I have for her. So Toots, this has been a really, really wonderful and insightful conversation. I'm not sure if at present we could see the light at the end of the tunnel, but as long as COVID remains an active global participant, the elephant, not just in the room but around the world. This industry is going to continue to take a hit, and all the service providers, etc., who have not been able to pivot, because I mean, the industry is so huge that even if everyone were to attempt to pivot, there is still not enough demand for everyone and for all the services. So some people are still going to be left out of the equation altogether. So the best advice we could give to you right now as a wedding vendor is to try as best as possible to see how you could pivot, how you could create partnerships and collaborations. One of the things that Shivanie has working for her is the fact that she is literally a one-stop shop. So she's not just a one wedding vendor. She's not just the wedding planner, but she is the person who helps the bride and groom to be able to pull all the pieces of the puzzle together. And that comes from years of knowledge. It's not some years of knowledge and experience. It's not just something that anybody can walk off the street and be able to do. So see how best you could create and foster partnerships and collaborations with other providers and other vendors, and offer something that other folks are not offering. Offer a value, a bundle of benefits, a value proposition, a unique selling point that other vendors are not yet able to offer. See how best you could digitize your services where possible, because that's not possible for everything and everybody. But I mean, think about it. If you're a singer and a wedding is happening via Zoom, why can't you do a live performance from your own studio at home that could be streamed via the Zoom platform to everybody else in attendance at the wedding? You don't actually have to physically be present at the wedding. How many entertainers or wedding singers and wedding entertainers have that provision or that service available? So it's not that COVID has happened and this is the end of it and we have to wait until it's done. But we have to really start thinking outside of that box to be able to survive, to thrive, or to if not to thrive, to at least survive during this time, because that's the name of the game right now, just survival. So Shivanie, thank you very much for joining us on today's edition of the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And I
saw the expression on your face when you said
it was very hard for me to get those words out of my mouth. Like I said at the start, in case you missed it, Shivanie and I have a very, very, very wonderful relationship based on sarcasm. Most relationships are based on love and shared values, etc. Ours is based on the fact that sarcasm is not something that everyone can grasp, and when you find someone who is able to grasp it, share it, and reciprocate, you hold on to that person. So I've been holding on to her since the day I met her, because this is my sarcasm partner for life. So thank you very much for sharing the insights. Good luck in continuing to pivot and continuing to find new ways to offer new and innovative services during this time and during this transitionary period. And best wishes in future.
Thank you, Ross. Pivot. I've been dying to say that all conversation long.
What's that, pivot?
No, Ross from Friends, with the pivot.
Yeah, pivot. Yeah. So he was really the first person to use that word, huh?
Well, he was the person that made it popular. Yeah. But thanks again, Shivanie, and thanks for joining us on episode 2, season 2 of Trini Inspiration. Do join us next week, God willing. We will be joined by chef extraordinaire, entertainer, and author of new best-selling cookbook called The Impregnation of Flavor, none other than Chef Jason Peru. Chef Jason will be joining us in studio as guest number 3, episode 3 of season 2, Trini Inspirations from Fazeer Events and Entertainment. So until then, bye for now, and bye.
Bye. God bless.